Story 1. I will never spend a dime with 1-800-Flowers. One year, they completely bungled a Valentine's Day delivery for my now wife. They actually called her to apologize, but never again. Story 2. When I was young, I worked in a small-town law office as a receptionist and assistant. There was a diner a few doors down where the office ordered lunch twice a week. Every week. It was about $100 per order in the early 1990s, so not a small amount of business for them in our rural area. I once went to pick up the order and paid for it all with a credit card one summer day. While waiting for it to be finished and packed, I asked for an ice water to go. They tried to charge me $1.49 for the cost of a regular drink, and I said never mind, figuring I would get something from the office kitchenette when I got back. I told the head lawyer about the interaction over lunch that day, not thinking anything of it, and he swore he would never spend another penny there again. They called a few weeks later asking why we had not ordered recently, after having essentially a standing order for so long, and he told them off. I worked there for another 2.5 years and never saw another order go to them. So not me, but my boss. Story 3. Not really a business, but I was the biggest fan of the band Megadeth. I purchased a Cameo message from Dave Mustaine, and he replied asking me to spend more money. It was so disappointing that I literally refused to listen to their music anymore. It actually bothers me to hear it now, and I know it's silly. Edit. I did not expect this to get so many replies. I responded to a couple of comments, but in case they get lost, I want to add that I complained to Cameo, received a credit, and used it to chat with Kiko Loureiro for a small amount. He was very nice and replied more than he really had to. The purpose of the Cameo was to wish my dad a happy Father's Day, and I'm glad he pulled through. Story 4. I had an auto shop perform routine maintenance on my 1970s sports car in the mid-1980s. They changed the fuel filter and had to drop the fuel pump to do it. They did not put the pump back on or tighten the bolts. Apparently, 2 days later, the pump fell off and was dragging on the ground, held up only by the fuel lines, as indicated by the scratch marks on the pump. I parked the car in the garage, and half a tank of gas drained out. The furnace in the garage kicked on at 5 a.m., and there was a fire. The fire was limited to the car, with smoke damage to the garage. The car was totaled. I went back to the shop, but they denied any responsibility. I was a teenager and did not know how to handle the situation, so I stopped going there after I got another sports car. I told other owners about it, and they stopped going there as well. It was all word of mouth since the internet was not available at that time. Story 5. I once boycotted a local bakery because of the owner. We became friends on social media because I frequent her shop. However, when I visited her posts, she ranted and shared her issues with clients and staff, including her accountant and supplier. I think that is very unprofessional. I know it is her page, but I was somewhat turned off by that. Story 6. Ordered food from Uber Eats. Watched the tracker as the driver collected the food, then headed in the opposite direction. 20 minutes later, the food was marked as delivered, despite the driver never coming within 3 miles of my village. I had to fight to get a refund because they would not believe it had not been delivered. I will never use their service again. Story 7. HP treated me poorly when I needed them as a non-business customer. They did not realize I was also a business customer and partner. Bricking my inexpensive printer and being unhelpful about it afterward has probably cost them millions in revenue by now. Serves them right. Story 8. A local lumber yard. One day, I was riding my bike down a public street where the business happens to be located. There was a man on a forklift unloading some lumber from a semi-trailer. I politely waited until he was out of the way and rode by. As I did, he yelled, "Ride somewhere else. This is a public street, buddy. You don't own it." Furthermore, I wasn't the slightest inconvenience or hindrance to your job. I have spent plenty of money on home supplies over the years, but never another penny at that place despite it being very convenient to my home location. Petty, but whatever. I drive an extra 10 minutes to do business elsewhere. Story 9. Around a year ago, I picked up work at a small pizza place in town for some extra money. I was already working at the local Domino's, and this place was the only other pizza joint in town. I worked there for about a month before quitting because they started docking my pay for no reason. It turns out they had been doing this to almost every other employee the entire time they were in business. Some of them even quit to work at Domino's. After quitting, I tried to take legal action against them, but they had covered their tracks well due to not having any digital evidence. Everything, including timesheets and wage calculations, was written down and disposed of whenever someone caught on. They docked over $500 worth of pay from me in the last 2 weeks alone. I shudder to imagine how much they took from everyone else. So, long story short, I boycotted them entirely and refused to step foot in the building. We had an Italy-themed festival in town a few months after, and a pizza eating contest was being held. I ditched it last minute when I found out that they were supplying the pizzas. You can imagine the sweet vindication I felt when they went out of business a few months ago. There is a new owner now. He moved here from Italy with his family, and they do a really good job running the place. The pizza is amazing, albeit a little more expensive, and they are all incredibly friendly. I am definitely going to make eating there a more consistent occurrence. Story 10. The closest I ever came was a small grocery store in my town. My father was in line with a handful of items when an out-of-towner, since we are a tourist town, pushed past him with an armload of items and dropped them on the conveyor belt. The owner, working the register, looked at my father and said, "I need their money," and allowed the woman to cut in line. We did not patronize the store again until it changed ownership. Story 11. Spotify. We had a communal work playlist that we all added songs to. It was fun and much better than just listening to the radio. Then Spotify banned it, forcing it to be private so nobody else could see or interact with it. The message I received said it violated the terms and conditions, but I was given no further explanation. I opened a support ticket to ask what the issue was, but they provided no information. So we remade it. It was good for a while, then they banned it again with the same automated email. We remade it a third time and they banned it again. Still no explanation. I was frustrated. So I opened another support ticket and said something like, "I am tired of you banning our playlists without explanation. Please provide an explanation or I will cancel my subscription." I was actually polite about it. Their response, "The explanation is in the email. Ticket closed." My response, I immediately canceled my Spotify subscription and have never used it since. Story 12. Heinz bought and immediately closed a local tomato processing plant nearby. We no longer buy their ketchup. French's then bought the factory and rehired every employee. Story 13. In my city, there is a very popular restaurant with good food where you regularly have to wait 30 to 40 minutes for a table. It is about a mile down the road from a bar where I worked security for years. The bar often reached capacity on weekends, requiring guests to wait to get in. One of the servers from the restaurant used to come into the bar, get excessively drunk, and make lewd comments toward me or imply that she thought we should hook up, which I was never interested in. She did this for years and I consistently rejected her. One busy night, she was in the bar and had already tried to flirt with me once or twice, so I shooed her away as usual. One of the owners of her restaurant, who is her friend, showed up. I told him we were at capacity and he would have to wait a few minutes for some people to leave. This adult man in his late 30s instantly started sobbing uncontrollably and screaming in my face about how offended he was and that he would never treat me like this at their restaurant. I explained that I regularly waited for a table there without complaining. He started crying harder, standing outside and calling people on his phone, trying to convince them to leave early because he might have to wait 10 minutes. The server, upset that her friend and boss had to wait a few minutes, came up to me and said, "You've always been such an asshole. Maybe your mom wouldn't have killed herself if you weren't." I permanently banned both of them from the bar and never went to their restaurant again, which is a shame because that place has the best pancakes I have ever had. Story 14. I boycott Facebook. Ever since the Cambridge Analytica scandal, they have only given more reasons to boycott them. Story 15. About 17 years ago, I bought one of Lululemon's brand new sports bras that claimed to measure heart rate. It didn't work at all. No reading ever. When I brought it back, they told me I had to size down for it to work because it needed an extra snug fit. The problem was, when I bought it, they didn't yet know that. I was already wearing the smallest size they made, and I'm not unusually small. There was no exchange or refund because they said they couldn't resell a bra. I explained repeatedly that I wasn't asking them to resell it. I was asking them to take back a defective product. I shouldn't have to lose hundreds of dollars because their company was still figuring out how its own product worked. They stared at me as if I had just crawled out from under a rock and suggested they start selling used underwear. There was absolutely no resolution, even though I escalated it to a manager. This was before it became common to speak to a manager, so it was an acceptable action. It has been nearly 2 decades, and I am still upset. Story 16. Papa John's, for obvious reasons and because over 20 years ago I ordered pizza and wrote a check. The delivery driver lost the check. They admitted the driver lost the check. I offered to write a new one and dropped it off at the restaurant. However, they cashed the lost check 3 weeks later. Story 17. I boycott every business that interrupts my YouTube viewing with compulsory advertisements. Ryanair, Lucozade, every single one of them, even if I have used their products for years. Story 18. I refuse to go to Subway since their cold-cut combo sandwich went from $5 for a footlong to $11.69 for a footlong sandwich with no extras. I am very disappointed with the company. Story 19. I have not been to Walmart in over 30 years. Then I watched the documentary Walmart, the high cost of low prices, and felt justified. Their business practices just irritate me. Story 20. A mechanic made me wait a while to book my bike in for a repair. This is fine and normal. Then, 2 weeks after I took it in, they still had not even touched it. Do not book me in if you do not have time to do it. I understand running a day or two behind, but not 2 weeks. Even a courtesy call letting me know they were very behind so I had the option to leave it or find a different mechanic would have been appreciated. The same mechanic told me my bike would be ready for pickup in the evening for a different job. I arrived about 2 hours before closing, and he told me he was just finishing it up and to come back at closing time. I was early, so I went to find a pub that serves food, sat down to eat, and kill some time. When I arrived 10 minutes before closing, he had already shut up shop and gone home for the day. There was no phone call or notification. I would not mind so much, but this meant I had to get a taxi 11 miles home. The mechanics are absolutely excellent when it comes to actually fixing problems and finding issues, but I need a mechanic who will communicate with me if things go wrong and more time is needed. Story 21. Little Caesars messed up my order and then blamed me for taking the wrong pizza. I took the pizza they brought to the counter when I came in and gave them my number. I went back after my friend bought the pizza from the location. Story 22. King's Mill bread. I put some bread in the toaster and noticed a plastic burning smell. I pulled the bread out and found 2 blue plastic prongs embedded in the bottom of the bread. I contacted King's Mill, who started an investigation. I was asked to take photos and send the bread with the plastic prongs embedded back to them at my own expense. After a few weeks, I received a letter stating that the 2 prongs came from their bread conveyor and included a £5 voucher for my troubles. I called them, saying £5 was insulting and would not cover the cost of my time, effort, postage, or the fact that it could have caused a fire and burned my house down. The woman on the phone became quite aggressive, told me I should be happy they conducted an investigation, said £5 was all I would receive, and then hung up. I have not bought King's Mill bread in 15 years. Story 23. Local sandwich and pie shop in a small town. We had been going there on and off for years as locals, about once a month or so. Rarely ate in, but would pick up food to take home. The pies were great. If we had guests, we would buy a whole pie. If it was just the 2 of us, we would get a slice or 3. One day, I noticed that a whole pie was more expensive than buying individual slices. They cut 6 slices from a whole pie. A slice of pie is $3.95. A whole pie is $28. 6 slices times $3.95 equals $23.70. I pointed this out to the manager and asked why I couldn't get the whole pie for the 6-slice price. She said it was because they would have to cut it into 6 slices. I politely argued that they wouldn't need to cut it since I would still take the whole pie. They only got 6 slices out of a pie anyway, so it didn't make sense to charge extra. They used disposable tins, so it wasn't about recycling. She said if I bought a whole pie, I had to pay the whole pie price. I told her I would just order 6 individual slices, and she responded that if I ordered 6 of the same pie, instead of a mix of pies, she would still charge me the full pie price. I reiterated that this didn't make sense. She said, "If you don't like it, you don't have to come back." So I haven't and don't. I overlook a lot, but if I am asked to take my business elsewhere, I will honor that request. I was polite and calm throughout the exchange. It was not busy or anything, so there was no reason for what she said. My wife was there and agrees. However, she keeps trying to get me to change my mind. I will take her to go get herself a slice if she wants, but I won't go in and I don't eat there anymore. Story 24. An online small business that I used to buy from regularly. I placed a pre-order, only for it to be canceled because the items were out of stock. I asked them to clarify. Yes, the website listed it as out of stock, but it was a pre-order item, and the site still allowed me to add it to my basket and process payment. So I took that to mean, not in stock yet. Their response was essentially that items available for pre-order are marked with one icon. Items sold out for pre-orders are marked with a different icon, and that this policy has served them well so far because generally people do not order an item marked as out of stock. I am sorry, but most businesses that sell online make a listing unavailable when it is out of stock. If your website allows people to order items that are not available, the problem is with your back-end systems, not the customer. Story 25. Back in the 1990s, Nike was caught using child labor to make soccer balls. It did not seem to me that they suffered any serious economic loss due to this revelation, so I am still boycotting them. I also do not buy Nestle products, and I try my best to avoid purchasing anything from companies owned by tobacco companies, so no Oscar Mayer or Kraft products for me. Story 26. I will never use any service from Uber again, and I suggest you avoid it as well. Here is how Uber treats people. I was drugged and robbed on vacation. I contacted Uber, my bank, and other relevant parties to report that I was robbed and that none of the charges were mine. Uber's response was basically, "You are probably just confused. You probably gave your credit card to a friend and don't remember it." They offered no refund. Eventually, I recovered the money through my credit card company. Never use Uber. They will mistreat you. Story 27. Hobby Lobby actively opposed covering employee benefits required by the Affordable Care Act. Story 28. I was 16 and the owner offered me a trial shift. It was one of my favorite stores, so I really wanted the job. 8 hours later, no payment. She said I had done amazingly, the staff loved me, and that she would be in touch. 3 days later, no word, so I chased her. She ignored me and hasn't responded to this day. I don't want to support a business that treats people like that, especially considering the nice, fake front she put on for customers when she was on the shop floor. Story 29. There are several local restaurants owned by the same man. He treats his employees terribly. He violated pandemic regulations repeatedly and used his Paycheck Protection Program loan to start another restaurant. I will not give him my business. Story 30. Temu has invasive and annoying advertisements. Their products are low quality, and their prices are misleading. Overall, their business practices are unethical. Story 31. Kia has absolutely horrible products and does not honor warranties. They will not even allow you to park on my property if you own one. Kia is the worst. Story 32. I boycotted Target after working a holiday season in one of their distribution centers. The place was run so poorly that I have not been to one of their stores in at least a decade in protest. They also made us watch an utterly laughable anti-union propaganda video during our orientation. It reminded me of those driver's education videos from high school. If you sign a union card, you could be signing away everything. Story 33. I live in a small village with a modest high street featuring typical chain stores. We also have a selection of independent shops that I make a conscious effort to support as much as I can. I am not wealthy, but I am fortunate enough to spend a little extra shopping at family-owned butchers and independent all-purpose stores. I know these businesses will disappear unless people use them, which is a major problem for high streets at the moment. We have the usual chain coffee shops, such as Costa Coffee and Starbucks, But this year I was delighted when a small independent coffee roaster opened in the village. I made a significant effort to support them, followed and engaged with their social media, and visited for coffee when I could, despite the expense. Recently, I went in feeling exhausted and sleep-deprived from caring for a sick toddler who was not sleeping. And because I had been unwell myself, we were also in the middle of a heat wave. I made the apparent mistake of asking for an iced cappuccino. The lady looked at me as if I were a fool and laughed in a condescending manner, saying, "I think you mean an iced latte, because it's kind of hard to make an iced cappuccino." She vaguely explained why, but I was so taken aback by her rudeness that I stopped listening. I have no problem being educated, but I absolutely will not tolerate being laughed at and patronized. If this had been a young employee just out of college and earning minimum wage, I would have let it go. However, I know for a fact that this woman was the co-owner along with her husband, and I decided then and there that I would never go back. Story 34. A local independent refill shop left me a rude note on my car. I parked outside the refill shop and went in. I purchased a few items, then went to the post office and the butcher's. This was a small local parade of about 6 to 7 shops. When I returned to the car, the owner had left a note about me parking in front of his business and taking up parking for his customers. It also mentioned how unaware I was of the struggles of small businesses. I continued parking in front of his shop whenever I could. I never went back into his store, and as of 3 months ago, he has gone out of business. Story 35. Old Navy. An online order was shipped to the wrong address. I called to report it and ask what could be done. They promised it would be refunded. Then, a few days later, I received the official decision that it would not be refunded. Case closed. What really angered me was that the order was split in two, and the second one had not shipped yet. I tried to get them to update the order, but they refused, saying I had to contact United Parcel Service once it shipped. I did that, and United Parcel Service said they would not change anything because a random person called them. Only the shipper could change it. I ended up doing a chargeback, but it really angered me that they promised it would be refunded because it is not fair to be charged for something not received, and then totally backtracked. Hospital Corporation of America Hospitals. They provide terrible care, are critically understaffed, and charge excessively. I have been in a billing dispute with them for a long time because they initially lost all my information. Story 36. I will not spend my money in any company that proudly uses its self-proclaimed Christian ideology as an excuse to deny the rights of others. Hobby Lobby, Tractor Supply, Chick-fil-A. Story 37. Disney. Their business practices are poor. Their products have been low quality and low effort for years. And do not get me started on the Disney adults. Story 38. The Susan G. Komen organization aggressively enforced their trademark on the phrase "for the cure," even against small independent fundraisers like Mush for the Cure, a sled dog race raising money for cancer research that Susan G. Komen sued. While trademark law requires protection of registered phrases, targeting good faith charities with similar missions diverts resources from research and damages public trust. This made the organization appear more concerned with brand control than advancing its stated cause. Story 39. I doubt a company as large as Amazon will even notice my boycott, but it is there. I have a simple philosophy about it. Jeff Bezos has a lot of money but hoards it instead of using it for good. Therefore, he does not need any of my money. Occasionally, he makes a few cents on the shipping. When I shop on eBay and buy from an Amazon seller by coincidence, but seriously, I strongly disapprove of that. Any billionaire could address a global problem, such as hunger or poverty, and make significant progress toward ending it completely. By choosing not to do good, they have embraced evil. Story 40. As Canadians, my wife and I have mostly stopped using all United States-based products and businesses due to the threats to our national sovereignty by former President Donald Trump. My mother lives in Michigan, and we will not visit until this administration is over. We miss Trader Joe's a lot. Story 41. The gas station closest to my house was locally owned by a man for about 20 years. Around the 5th year of his ownership, the owner himself was working the checkout and was extremely rude to my mother. My mom is one of the kindest people in the world, to the point that if there is any criticism of her, it is that she is so kind to people that she has trouble standing up for herself. I cannot remember now what he was upset about, but he really gave her a hard time over something insignificant. When my mom told me what happened, she sweetly said, "I don't think I'm going to buy gas from him anymore." And that was all it took. I launched a one-man boycott campaign against that station from the day she told me about the interaction until the day he sold it. It was a relief to find out he sold it because I had been driving out of my way for gas for 15 years. When I mentioned this to her after the station was under new ownership, she said something like, "Oh yeah, I kind of forgot about that. I have to admit that I still bought gas there when I really needed it. Mom, I have been defending your honor through economic sanctions for 15 years. Have made other people keep driving. I got my wife's family involved in the boycott. I have been calling that man an unpleasant person for nearly 20 years, and you gave up the fight? Oh, it didn't seem like something worth holding a grudge over. He was probably just having a bad day. I regret nothing. To the old gas station owner, I would picket your retirement home if I knew where it was. Apologize to my mom." Story 42. Not a business, but I was the biggest Kanye West fan growing up. His music allowed me to express myself in ways that I initially was not confident to. However, when he started to make anti-Semitic remarks and promote related merchandise, I had enough. I cannot support someone who stands for hate, especially hate of my own identity. Once I made my stance clear and started to avoid his music, my friends noticed and have stood in solidarity with me. Story 43. The auto mechanic a couple of miles down the road. I was riding my bike and needed to tighten a screw on a cleat, so I stopped to borrow a screwdriver. The mechanic flat out said no. Now, it has been 20 years, and I refuse to have them repair any of our cars. I will add, it might be a liability to loan out tools, and I can understand his concern, but he was rude about the whole situation. Story 44. I live in a small rural town. During coronavirus disease, one of the local gas stations put a sign on their door saying you would not be allowed in the store if you were wearing a mask. They obviously received a lot of backlash and backtracked. Story 45. In Germany, Bircher AG, an office and personal computer mail order company, faces criticism due to their support for the Alternative for Germany party. Story 46. Starbucks. Not because they did not pay tax in the United Kingdom. My ex-husband spent every spare moment there drinking decaffeinated coffee, conning women into bed, and deceiving investors out of money. Story 47. I watch a lot of Hulu, especially at the gym. The advertisement for AskReddit, an HIV inhibitor, plays at least 3 times every half hour while I am on the cardio machine. You bring your A game to everything you do. I am not gay, but if I ever start having sex with men, I will boycott AskReddit. I strongly dislike that commercial. Story 48. Planet Fitness. Horrible gym concept. The main reason is that when my aunt was battling breast cancer and was in remission, she signed up for a Planet Fitness membership to focus on getting healthier. She did not have hair at the time and liked wearing a bandana to cover her bald head instead of a wig. She went into Planet Fitness and they refused to let her work out because they have a no bandana policy. When she explained why she wore it, they would not change their stance. I am not sure if they still have that policy, but their behavior is unacceptable. You cannot advertise being a judgment-free zone and treat people like that. Story 49. The invasive advertisements were getting out of hand. If I see an advertisement that seems particularly annoying or worse, particularly creepy, I mentally take note not to buy that product, even if it is inconvenient for me. Story 50. Local restaurant that my wife and I used to go to every week. We made a reservation for her birthday, which happened to be election day. No one mentioned that it would be half booked by a local candidate for her election day party, and they would be filming and disruptive during the entire meal. I cannot go back there because the staff did not warn us that the usual atmosphere would be filled with disruptive people trying to film promotions with me in the background while I ate dinner. It was unreasonable to expect people to tolerate that. I made sure to express my displeasure in the background. Every chance I got to disrupt the takes. Putting politics aside, it was an absolutely miserable experience. The establishment got greedy and lost a customer for life, along with several others due to our word of mouth. No one wants to plan a night out and have it ruined by a disruptive party at the bar. Story 51. Hobby Lobby demonstrates rank hypocrisy by refusing to cover birth control costs on insurance for their mostly young female employees because it is against the company's religious beliefs, yet purchasing the vast majority of their products from China, where government policies have mandated abortions to limit families to one child. This is unacceptable. Story 52. A local auto parts store in Poway, Southern California, gave me the wrong part despite my providing the correct information about my car. The last time it happened, the employee accused me of having installed and used the part and said it could not be returned or refunded. It was 2 axles for an Audi. They accepted one axle but refused the other because it had dust on it and looked used. Who would install and use only one axle? I told them I had not used the part and only opened the box, but they still refused and told me to leave. I was polite and did not raise my voice or act entitled. I will never go there again. Story 53. Hi-Fia. This is a Midwest grocery store chain that proclaims it is employee-owned and there's a helpful smile in every aisle, along with very high prices. I would say all of their corporate leadership are completely unreasonable. Hy-Vee pays a large amount of money to sponsor athletic fields and athletes. They donated significant funds to former President Donald Trump and continue to make questionable decisions to the point they seem to have an identity crisis. Are they a higher-end grocery store? Or can they remain that while also devoting floor space and aisles to selling beauty products, clothing, shoes, and kitchen accessories? They have a rewards program they try to promote heavily, where points expire with a paid tier that was not well received and quickly discontinued. They also started an everyday low-price program that displays select products in the store and compares them to other nearby grocery stores, but instead of offering cheaper prices, they match the competitors' prices. It is unusual. Some locations have their own private police force equipped with tasers and body armor to prevent shoplifting from the grocery store. They were in the news recently when they cut 100 to 150 jobs from their corporate office and offered those employees shifts on the floor or as cashiers instead of paying unemployment. Overall, I believe their leadership team is ineffective and incompetent. Customers pay for poor financial decisions through higher prices. I shop there as little as possible. Story 54. Netflix. Ever since they implemented the policy requiring users to be on the same Wi-Fi network. My parents are in India, and I am in Canada. I am very frustrated with Netflix. Story 55. I walked out of a small-town restaurant because the owner yelled at their employees. I was waiting in line to order after I had moved to the town. I was excited to try the small-town spots people recommended to me. As I was about to order, the owner told me to hold on a moment, called their waiter and cashier to come with them, and I could hear them yelling at this girl. I stood there stunned and decided to walk out. A woman who entered noticed me and asked if everyone was okay. She was an employee. I said, honestly, I just moved here and wanted to try the place, but after the owner yelled, I've decided to go elsewhere. The woman looked down in understanding, and I left. I told the neighbor who recommended it that I wouldn't be back. She was surprised by my reaction but understood. The place closed during the COVID-19 pandemic, and I felt karma had caught up after that. A new place took over after the pandemic, and I tried it out. The food was wonderful. The owner is cheerful and a great addition to the community. Story 56. I boycott businesses that test their cosmetics on animals, Nestle and all their subsidiaries if I can identify them, Asda in the United Kingdom, Albert Bartlett, and anything owned by Mike Ashley, including Brewdog. Mostly because they treat people, the planet, or animals poorly. Story 57. Apple started because they forced users to relentlessly use Apple peripherals, which actually made their product worse for customers. I thought this was the opposite of what a company should do. The more I observed them, the more I saw blatant hypocrisy in everything they claim to represent but actually oppose. Apple is an absolutely vile company, and I stopped supporting them about 10 years ago. Watching Tim Cook with former President Donald Trump a few days ago confirmed that how I feel about Apple is completely justified. Story 58. I do not buy from pet shops that sell animals. I do not want to support animal exploiters. I buy most supplies from the veterinarian and the food from the supermarket for my dog or rescued animals. Story 59. Meh, so many. Used to avoid all the major sports brands because of sweatshops. These days everyone does it, and the situation has slightly improved. Now I just don't buy Nike and Adidas because they are overpriced, and I don't get paid to advertise their logo on my clothes. I also boycotted Aldi and Lidl for bad working conditions. Aldi improved, but when I have the choice, I still don't go there. I boycott Nestle and all Nestle-affiliated brands, including L'Oreal, Starbucks, and all fast food chains for bad working conditions, environmental issues, and I don't like that food culture. Mars, because there are enough reasons, but my main one is pet care and their involvement with veterinarians. Deutsche Bank, because they are just evil. Commerzbank, because of their role during the financial crisis. Lindt, because I don't trust them based on that trial where it turned out that their chocolate isn't that good. Volvic and Coca-Cola for their ideas to privatize water. Most others aren't international. Story 60. I am one of many Canadians boycotting United States businesses and products. We are doing so due to the continual threats to our sovereignty made by your monarch. Story 61. I boycott any business in my super red area that is actively promoting their Make America Great Again, anti-lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender white Christian nationalism in your face, which is a lot. I also am in a local group that maintains a list of blue-owned small businesses and lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender-owned, minority-owned, etc. I support them as much as possible. Story 62. Airbnb never again. I had to cancel my reservation after the first night for safety reasons. I was not comfortable sleeping on a construction site where the foreman had a master key and there was no inside deadbolt, among many other issues. They refunded the week-long reservation. I picked up a severe case of bedbugs from the stay, which cost me about $1,000 to eliminate. Airbnb only refunded me $200 for the bedbugs. However, it took 2 months and more than 40 calls to receive the payment. Never again. Story 63. Read some negative things about Subway years ago regarding how they treated employees, so I stopped supporting them. I searched recently, and it seems they have addressed the issues, so I have ended my boycott. Story 64. I thought I caught my local repair garage red-handed in 3 cases of trying to inflate my repair bill. In one case, their claim was legitimate. Another involved professional negligence and was not necessarily malicious. The third case seemed to be a ridiculous warranty markup policy or just a poorly explained charge. Either way, I do not go there anymore. Their response to my online review was unprofessional and showed no intent to apologize for the legitimate issues. Story 65. I refused to return to Chili's. It was Friday. I had ordered soup to go. Despite the 30-minute drive from work, it wasn't ready when I arrived, and they sent me to wait at the bar. I was still wearing my school shirt and badge. A man at the bar, dressed in a nice suit and accompanied by 2 women also in suits, made eye contact with me, smirked and loudly said, "People who can't do anything teach." It had been a very rough day of meltdowns and unhelpful coworkers. I teach special education. I was grumpy and tired. That blatant insult upset me. I demanded to know if he was talking to me. He proceeded to disparage all teachers, and I argued with him while the women laughed. Then the staff asked me to leave. They didn't inform me that my soup was ready, so I could have left on my own. They didn't let me take my soup from the to-go area. They refused to discuss a refund and insisted I had to call. As I was leaving, they apologized to the businessman. Corporate Chili's didn't care. I got my refund by appealing to my bank after a week and a half. I will never go to Chili's again. Story 66. The owners of a building in my neighborhood evicted a long-term tenant who operated a wine bar everyone loved. Then they opened their own bar in the same space, so I will not visit their new bar. Story 67. If you advertise on any of my social media and use pop-ups, I will simply ignore your brand and suggest to my friends that they do the same. Most of these seem to be scams, as you can find the exact product on AliExpress for a fraction of the price. Story 68. I have boycotted several companies from all the YouTube advertising. I may know your brand, but not in a positive way. I will buy the competitor brand even if it costs a bit more when needed. Story 69. I try to avoid any product manufactured by Nestle, but it is tough because their reach is extensive. I saw a video a long time ago where their chief executive officer flat out stated that he did not believe every individual on the planet should have the right to clean drinking water. Story 70. I avoid Starbucks because their business model is to serve low-quality coffee intentionally, so that customers pay for high-calorie add-ons. Story 71. Hewlett-Packard. I will never buy or recommend any of their products. They have some really bad practices. Nestle has a very bad reputation. Story 72. McDonald's and Starbucks. Poor working conditions. Bad quality. Worse benefits. Too expensive now. Feed Israeli Defense Forces soldiers for free, no employee benefits. Anything owned by Loblaws/Galen Weston, Loblaws, No Frills, Canadian Superstore, Zehrs, Fortino's, Independence, Shoppers Drug Mart, Life Labs, Joe Fresh, TNT, No Name/President's Choice, Bloor Street Market, Maxi, etc. Worst company I have ever worked for. After taxes and union dues, you make less than minimum wage. Cap hours at 24 a week for part-time staff. Greed and shrinkflation. They own their own supply chains but upcharge. Canadian Farmers Market's brand carrots are cheaper to buy in the United States than in Canada. 90% of Canadians live within 10 kilometers of a Loblaws-owned store, but they do not have a monopoly. Canadians are literally starving, and Weston thinks it is funny. The way they handled the pandemic made me literally cry as a worker, overabused and underpaid. Nestle, Chief Executive Officer, is terrible. Water is a human right. They own wells in towns with drought, and locals cannot access water. Similar to the Irish potato famine, but with water across the entire continent of Africa. Baby formula scandal. They gave formula away for free, causing mothers to stop lactating, then started charging for the formula and water, which they knew mothers could not afford. Many infants starved to death because mothers could not lactate or purchase formula. This was the hardest because I used to love Nestea, now Fuse. Name changed to distance from the namesake. And I really miss Milo drink. Our money is how we vote. Everyone and everything is already bought and paid for, but they still need our money. Change never happens until someone's pocket is empty and a stone is thrown. It has to be both. Always has had to be both. Complacency and a desire for peace and order is how we the people partake in our own enslavement. Comfort and order are tools of the elite. Boycotts work. Unity and community work. We have to give up things to get needs. Story 73. Sears, because their appliance delivery service sent a broken dishwasher and then made us fight to get a replacement. My experience is a small example of poor Sears practices that contributed to their downfall. Story 74. Hobby Lobby went to the Supreme Court to be allowed not to cover any form of birth control for their employees under the Affordable Care Act rules and still be considered compliant because birth control violated their constitutional right to religious freedom. They are allowed to impose that freedom on their minimum wage employees who need health care and cannot afford to become pregnant. Birth control is also used to treat many other issues women have, such as polycystic ovary syndrome and endometriosis. However, they do not care. I have polycystic ovary syndrome and need to be on hormonal birth control. Otherwise, my lining builds up too much, and I risk needing a dilation and curettage. They also do not want to cover that. Story 75. I used to live within walking distance of a good Chinese restaurant that was very affordable. I loved it, and it was part of my weekly diet. One time, I found a roach wing in the rice and returned it. The owner refused to issue a refund and became angry when I declined a replacement rice from the same batch that had the roach wing. I never returned. Story 76. I and many others boycotted the angry bartender on Facebook for publicly shaming an assault victim. The person had been physically assaulted at a bar, possibly drugged, and was seeking any witnesses who could help. The victim happened to be a previous burn victim, and the owner of the page made fun of their deformities by including photos of her legs and feet to show the bruising that occurred during the assault. After being called out on the post by several fans, the owner of the page deleted the post without addressing the disgusting behavior or offering an apology. As a bartender, I could never support someone who does not protect their patrons and mock someone with disabilities. Story 77. Chipotle experienced declining quality and raised prices 3 times during the pandemic while reporting record profits. I stopped going before they began cutting corners, which likely happened when they realized they could not charge their customers any more than they already had. Story 78. Olive Garden for economic discrimination. This is 04. We looked very shabby. We walked into Olive Garden during peak busy time, around 7 on a Friday or Saturday. It's been over 20 years. And we were told it was busy and to sit at the bar. They would buzz us later. Fine. We sat at the bar, 3 of us, while other people came, waited, and were seated. This lasted for an hour. I looked over and saw someone walk in and get a table immediately. I approached the hostess and she said, "Oh, I see the lady who put us at the bar." She made eye contact and turned away. There was a very negative vibe, as if we looked poor and she didn't want us in her section. I almost lost my temper, but my wife pushed me out the door. We filed a complaint with corporate and received about $200 to $300 in gift cards. We have never returned. Story 79. Goya, for supporting Donald Trump. I really wanted to boycott Uber, but there are no alternatives. I boycotted that art supply store, I don't remember the name, for having barbaric anti-birth control items on their health insurance. Story 80. Local pizza place. We did a barefoot marathon to raise money for kids with no shoes, and some of us went to get pizza afterward, even though there was a sign that said, "Welcome barefoot runners." When we walked in, we were asked to leave because we had no shoes. It has been 14 years. I have not been back since, and about 30 other participants feel the same way. Story 81. There are many companies to boycott, but one coffee company I swear never to buy from is a local shop franchised by a celebrity called Pickup Coffee. Ever since I read about delayed wage problems and unfair labor practices, I no longer think of this coffee shop when I get cravings. Story 82. Terrible service. I offered them the opportunity to make it right, but they chose not to, so we never went back. Others must have felt the same, as they were closed within 3 months. Story 83. I was just on vacation in a southern beach town. There were many tourist shops. One of them had very hateful political signs posted out front. I stayed far away. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.